I've got this for anybody that's not here. So like I said, today we're gonna do a little bit of Inkscape. I'm gonna show you a couple of things, and Caitlin, I'm gonna use your little picture as an example, and then you can kind of finish this up because there's a couple things that I want to do um, with that, and yours is just like a really good example of that. So I'm going to use that one as an example to help you guys out. Technically, the due date for your little CNC plasma art project is maybe next Monday, next Tuesday. I don't remember what I set the date as. Don't worry about that. That's more of just kind of like a deadline. You should try to get those things done, really get them done by the end of the semester. It's up to you if you want to cut those things out. Like if you're doing something for a gift for somebody for Christmas, obviously you're going to want to, come in and cut or have me cut it for you. It's completely up to you if you want to do that. If you want to come here and you want to see that process, you can by all means come in. You just have to schedule it with me. Even though the in-person labs are canceled, we can still have students coming in to pick up materials and stuff because that was kind of always the case. So I'm just gonna go with that. We're safe here. There's only gonna be one person at a time, and stuff will be sanitized in between that. So when you do get your artwork done, and you want to come and you want to cut your stuff out, just schedule a time with me. If you don't want to, cut that out, still contact me and say, let me know and say, hey, I'm not, I don't want to come in. Maybe you're too far away and you can't do that. Or you just don't feel safe. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. Just say, hey, I'm not going to be able to come in. Shoot me an email, but say, hey, I want this artwork done because I want to make sure you guys get the artwork that you have. You may want something else than what you created. You may want something that we've created. I know I've shown you guys that American flag. You're more than welcome to to do that one, as a cutout. I may just take like a general video of like one of those things if you don't come, so that way you can see that thing in process. But if you do want to come in and you want to cut that out and you want to get that because you want to get that gift done, make sure you get your artwork done. Email me if you have. There's a couple of you that have emailed me today, and I've been kind of working back and forth with you on that. And then we can get those things cut out and you can grab your stuff. You'll need to like paint and probably do some other dress up work, but we'll get the cutting done and get those things cut out. And just really anytime. I mean, schedule it with me. Just let me know. I usually have classes like at this time, Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday from 2 to 3. Other than that, I'm pretty much open. But just let me know. Don't try to just show up here because I may be running errands or doing something else, getting other materials or whatever. So just let me know when you are available and when you want to come by and cut it out. But you can do that really anytime after, starting next week. And I'll be here. I'm here every day. So, and most times I'm available. So just basically sign up and say, hey, can we do 10 o'clock? Yeah, cool. We'll do it on Monday. We'll do 10 o'clock. Any questions with that? All right, good. If you do, right, just let me know and we can go from there. The other thing I'm going to do today is I'm going to show you guys how to change the wire out in the MIG gun. The MIG gun that we were using last week, we had some issues. We had some rust kind of built up on it, and if you remember, it wasn't really feeding correctly. That's because there's stuff that's on the wire, and so we're going to basically pull that wire out. We're going to replace it in the gun and try to fix that problem that we have. And so it's good experience for you guys to actually have something that we actually need to pull apart and we need to do it. So I'm just going to do that with you guys after I show you some stuff with Inkscape to help finish off your projects there. So anyway, let's share the screen here. We're going to go to Inkscape. So we have this image here, and what I may do is I'm actually going to just delete this thing altogether because I don't want this thing in here. No, come on. Would you delete? Edit. Cut. Oh. There we go. Okay. So kind of from the beginning, Caitlin had this project, and she was having issues where it was like the lines were stretching out. I'm not 100% sure on what was going on, but we're just going to kind of start fresh with this. We've got a little horse riding scene here. This is just an image that was pulled off. I just labeled it horse riding scene. I don't know if that's really what it is, but that's what I called it. We need to make sure we have our selection tool. I like to just, come on. Would you select? There we go. Oh, come on. Why is it not moving for me? There we go. Okay. I like to just kind of keep it over there. Not that it really matters too much. So when you have an image like this, and this is actually a pretty good image, there might be a couple things that we need to adjust on here, but we can, I'll kind of go through that with this. So whenever we pull an image in, the biggest thing, if we have something, we want to trace the bitmap. So we're going to go to path. We're going to go to trace bitmap. You got to make sure your image is selected. Make sure you have live preview because this is going to give you a good example of what it's going to look like. I typically just use this brightness cutoff, so it kind of, masks the white and the black together. You can use edge detection, but brightness cutoff is typically what I do. On this image, it's a really clean image. It's a good high quality. You can see how big the image is. That's kind of what we want to see on here. And earlier, you can kind of mess with these things, right? And you can get it to be like darker where the lines are a little bit more. You'll probably see it here in a little bit. You'll see these lines start to kind of come closer together here. If we go all the way up, see how it just kind of turns everything black because there's no contrast there. Standard set is like 4.450. And that's kind of, we'll click out of there. That's kind of what I left this image as. And it was pretty good. So I'm going to click OK on this. And then I'm going to close down this little window right here. Now, if I grab this image, this top image right here is my vectorized image. You might be able to see, if there's color, you can really see it because it turns it black. But it's always going to be that top layer there. And you'll know because see how I can click on this, I can double click and see how I got all these little like nodes and stuff. This one doesn't have that. That's just the image. We want to just delete the original image. Okay, so if you're unsure of if it's the original image, got to make sure I go to my selection tool here. I can just hit the delete button and that gets rid of that stuff. So that's pretty simple. That's really what we need to kind of focus on. We're going to try to move. If I try to like move some of these things, see this, see how I'm trying to move this? I don't know if this is what you were having problems with, but if you notice what I'm doing here is I'm actually grabbing individual nodes and stretching these things out, trying to move this image. I'm just going to hit Control Z. I'm going to get rid of all those things. Okay. And now I've got that. So I want to go Control Y to kind of return that back. What is going on here? I think I went back too far. All right, so we're going to select our image. We're going to go back to path. We'll just trace bitmap. We'll make it easier. We're going to leave all those numbers the same because it looks good on this image. Some images may be a little bit more blurry. You just hit OK once. It's not going to close this window down, so you got to close that down. You can then grab that vectorized image, delete your original, and then if you want to drag and bring this back in, make sure you don't have those nodes selected, so don't double click on that. And that's going to allow you to kind of move this thing around. So Caitlin, I think that might be what's going on from the image that I saw. I think that might be what was happening here. So from this image here, we're pretty much set and good to go. There is a couple things that may kind of be kind of funky. And it may be like this tail right here. You notice all these small little details, right? This stuff is not going to be very big when we go to cut these things out. And so this stuff is going to be very blotchy and it may come out kind of bad. My suggestion, these things might be okay. This is going to kind of cut out that little belt area, but there's metal that's going to hold that together. There's metal that's going to hold that together. That should be pretty good there. But with this tail, we maybe just want to like take these things and maybe kind of adjust them a little bit, maybe just kind of make a long tail there, or maybe just get rid of it altogether. If you notice on like this one right here, there's no tail. I think it looks okay. That's completely up to you on what you want to do with this stuff. But what we're gonna do with this image here, and this is probably, regardless of what you're gonna do, if you need to edit it or if you're just gonna be able to cut it out like this, we wanna make sure we select that image, get these nodes that are up there. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna go to path and we're gonna break these things apart. So that way we can deal with these parts individually. We'll be able to edit that tail. We'll be able to do that. You'll notice, I've got these little parts in here. You can't see it. It completely blacked things in. So just like we talked about, we got this fill stroke down here at the bottom. We want to make sure that we go to no fill on here. And we want to make sure that we have the stroke and we have that stroke on fill. Why is this not doing what I want it to do? Oh, I know why it's not doing what I want it to do. All right, let's select all that. Let's go to path again. We'll break them apart. It fills these things in. I didn't have these things selected, so I'm going to select all these things and then we'll go to the fill. and we'll go no fill on this thing. We'll make sure that we have the stroke selected to a color there. And then we'll click off of this, and you'll notice we can see our image. Now, like when I highlight, see how it highlights this outer portion right here? Where it'll highlight the inner portions. This has broken this image apart completely. So now we're dealing with these individual parts. On this tail, what may be a good idea is to literally just kind of delete some of these things. You can delete all of them if you want, right? But all these little nodes right there are going to be a real pain to kind of cut. You can take, you know, this one, like if you're like, okay, I don't want any of these things there. Come on, highlight it. I'm just hitting the delete button. These things are really small, so let me try to just highlight it all, delete it. Seems to be I'm having to highlight them twice. So I highlight it once, highlight it again, and then it'll delete. So if we clean these things up, we get rid of all these small little nodes that we have here. We can highlight them, we can delete them. And then you can take, and once you get those things, you can kind of stretch these things out a little bit, right? If you wanted to have a tail, you could do that. You could draw. I think what might be easier, and I'm just going to do this right now, but Caitlin, it's completely up to you how you want to handle this thing. Okay. There's not any right or wrong way to do this. What am I doing here? I'm selecting that thing. Oh, go again. So I can just kind of highlight these things here, right? Boom, boom, boom. We can get rid of all that stuff, kind of clean up this image a little bit. If you wanted to like keep this one, you're like, I want to see like a little bit of that tail, you can kind of select these things. Notice how we can kind of drag these things out. We can kind of create a little tail space. Completely up to you how you want to handle it. Like I said, I'm just going to delete this stuff right now. I think I've got to get somebody chat here. Yeah, that should work. I mean, as long as you get rid of it. Probably the biggest thing, Caitlin, is really when you're looking at the image. If you go down to this fill stroke, the easiest way to deal with this stuff is to deal with the strokes here. Try not to have these things filled in. And the reason for that is when you guys are cutting on this plasma is not going to cut anything in between here. It's not going to, if this is black, it's not going to cut that. That's more of a visual thing for you to kind of see that. And it may be good to kind of give you that visual of what it might look like. But you know, when you're doing this and you're editing it, if you see a bunch of lines in here, maybe it's blacked out, maybe you don't see it. But if you go to the stroke only and not the fill, you might see a bunch of lines, and that plasma will cut that stuff out. So it may hide it if it's kind of filled in and you may not see it. So the stroke is really a good way for you to identify, are we going to have issues? Things like this, you might be, you know, kind of cautious of, because that is pretty small. You know, maybe you delete it. And if you delete that, it doesn't really take anything away from that image, right? It's still, to me, I think this image still looks good. We're just deleting some of those. It'd be the same thing right here, right? We can highlight those things, we can delete that. Not really going to take anything away from this image, but it's getting rid of those really small, fine details, because this thing just doesn't have the capability. Stuff like that, that should be fine. I would say that little, where is it? Come on, get in there. That one should be fine, but all the little stuff on these trees, highlight them, delete them, get rid of them. Okay, cool. Does that help? Hopefully. Yes. Okay, cool. Anyway, so the other thing that I wanted to show you with this program is kind of creating layers. And with these things broken apart, remember, you got to highlight the whole thing, go to path, go to break apart. That's going to allow you to deal with these pieces individually and not as one group. So the other thing that we want to do is we want to kind of set some layers on here. And that's going to really help with our program to make life a little bit easier. So if we want to bring up the little layers kind of program, we can go to layer, go down to the very bottom, you can click layers. And right here, it's going to, I'm going to move this thing out of the way. Right here, it's going to tell us that we have layers. And right now we've got layer 1. That's everything here. If I click on this eyeball, notice how it gets rid of it. So you can click on the eyeball to close it. So that way you're only seeing anything that's not in layer 1. So it hides layer 1. You can lock layer 1 right here to where I can't do anything. Notice how I can't click on anything. So if you get something done, you're like, okay, I'm good with that layer. I don't want to mess with it. You can lock it. If you happen to lock it on accident and you can't click on anything, try to make sure you got the layers unlocked so that way you can edit these things. What we're going to do, I'm going to get this image zoomed in here if I can. There we go. That's a little bit better. Now, when we go to cut these things, the metal is going to be like right here where my mouse is at, right? This is going to be empty space. That's going to be empty space, right? That's what's going to drop down, and it's going to hold all of this stuff together. That's kind of what we're looking for. It's important to understand what you want to be metal and what you want to be, dropped out on these things. What we want is anything that's in the middle. We want these things to be what we call like an inside offset cut, meaning that the plasma is going to start cutting inside because we don't care about this metal, and it's going to bring it up to the edge, and then again, it's going to cut around this stuff. Anything that's on the outside, or we want like an outside cut, so we want it to start on the outside because we want the metal to stay clean. We're going to want to have as an outside. So we're really going to focus on building two layers, an inside and an outside. Probably on this one, the easiest thing for us to do is that's going to be inside, that's inside. Everything in here is an inside cut, because anything that's going to cut, anything that's got like a complete circle like this right here, it's going to start cutting on the inside. And that's good because that's what we want to basically get rid of, right? We want to get rid of the center portion and the outer portion, right? We want that to be metal. On here, the outer portion we want to cut out, and the inner portion, right, it's going to be metal. So that's why we're going to have outside versus inside. So we can do this. I can label these things, and the easiest way for us to do this, and most of you, if you're doing something similar to this is going to be the same process. We're going to label that inside. Right now, you'll notice that everything right now is an inside, okay? And there's really only one outside. And so to do this, we're going to click on this little plus right here, and we're creating a new layer. We're going to label this one outside, and I'm going to click add. And you'll notice, right, if I click on this thing, oh, that's on my inside, sorry. If I click on the outside, notice nothing happens. But if I were to select this outer layer, notice how it grabs all those nodes there. I can right click on this thing, and I can move this layer. So everything that I just selected, right, it's selected, it's going to select everything that's on the outside, everything that's connected to that. I can move this thing to the outside layer. I can say move. Notice everything looks the same. If I were to minimize the inside though, and kind of blank that out, you'll notice I just have the border out here. And so when we cut in the plasma is going to start its cut on the outside here, and then it's going to cut here, and then it's going to cut all around. So when it starts, it's going to make a little notch, but it's going to be outside of the thing. We're not worried about that because it's not going to affect the inside of that metal. Same thing here. If I were to go on my inside, you'll notice that I'm missing that whole outer layer, right? So the image doesn't obviously look complete. But all of these ones, anything that this essentially is next to these things is going to be metal. So that's a hole, right? That's going to be bare, and then outside of that is going to be metal. So these are all going to be inside cuts that we're going to want to make here. And that outer one is going to be an outside cut. And for most of you, that's probably going to be the same kind of deal, right? The only thing that you're going to cut out is the whole outer layer. And this is going to cut out, that's going to drop, and it's going to be good. The one thing that we may be, and we don't really know sometimes, is on these, like how close are these lines, and are they going to mess that stuff up? It really depends. I like to say try to make sure you have 1/8 of an inch. I think of this one, we're going to probably do this like 2 feet, right, by 2 feet. We're going to go ahead and we'll open these things up to see all this stuff. We can highlight these things as a whole. We can make sure we go to inches on this stuff. And we can resize these things. Right now it says that we're at 4 inches. That's not right. There we go. Okay, so make sure we're not on the nodes thing. You want to be on that selection tool. We want to highlight all those things as individual parts. This is more like it. We're going to go to inches here. We want to make sure that this aspect ratio is locked. And right now you can see this image as it is 22.396 inches wide by 23.668 inches high. I think that's probably, probably about where we want to be at. So we don't really need to mess with that. We got 2 feet by 2 feet. I think that's what I told you guys. Somewhere around there is what we'll have. So that's a fairly decent sized project. At this point, all we'd have to do is just go file. We're going to save as. and we want to make sure we save this as a DXF file. Okay, so a desktop clutter folder. We're going to go like this. We're going to save it under Caitlin's name because she's got that. If you put it under your name, it's going to be a lot easier for me because then we can just kind of pull up the images. So as I have these things, you can, you know, ship it over to me. I can kind of take a look at it, make sure everything looks okay. And then you can save it under your name and I'll save them all together. Just click OK on all these things. And then in our file, we're going to have a DXF file. Now, I don't think the DXF files are going to pull up into here. So it's a good idea to not only save this as a DXF, but you also want to save it as an SVG. So if you save it as an SVG, it should save all of your changes, and then you can go back through and you can edit it. I'm going to replace this one, obviously, because that's kind of what we have. So that way you can go back through and edit, because I think sometimes if it's a DXF, it doesn't pull it up in Inkscape, but our computer software can pull up the DXF file, and we can do that. So if we have some editing or some things that we need to do, just save two files. Save one as an SVG, that's Inkscape's program, and then save one as a DXF, so that way the reader can do that. So, and the DXF is really the one that I need. The SVG is more for you to kind of, you know, edit those things and go back to it if you want to make changes later to it. Cool. What questions do we have about that? I'm going to stop the share real quick here. All right. So we're good. If you guys do, okay, don't hesitate. Send me an email, let me know, and we can go from there. But what we're going to jump to now is replacing this wire in this MIG machine, because it is pretty much destroyed. Oh, I get my mic set up here. All right, and hopefully you guys can hear me good. But in this MIG machine, we're really dealing with the top part of this. We're not dealing with, you know, anything that's kind of down low here, because that's, you know, that's all the machine that's going to run it. Everything that the MIG wire is going to be right here, coming into our little spool, and then coming out into our gun right there. So we can kind of lift this thing. Maybe if my mic gets out of the way, we can kind of lift this thing up, and I'm going to bring you guys in a little bit closer here. My computer will allow me to do that. We'll zoom in a little bit here. So on here, and you can kind of actually see some of the stuff. You can see kind of the discoloration, see where it gets a little bit darker and it's kind of shiny, and it's a little bit darker. That's all just kind of rust that has been built up onto this thing. Try to turn my mic a little bit for you guys. So that's all rust that has basically built up on this MIG wire. So I think it's only the outer layers. So what we're going to do is we're simply just going to cut this wire out right here. We've got a little tension belt right here with our rollers. We're going to undo that thing. And then all we're going to do is just pull this wire out of this MIG gun. The biggest thing when we're cutting this wire off is we want to make sure that we're supporting the wire here, so that way we don't have our whole spool unrolled. We're going to unravel some of this spool just because we need to get rid of it. Normally, it's the end of it, or if it's, you know, the whole thing's bad, we cut it off, we throw this bundle of wire away. We would throw this bundle of wire away right here because we're not concerned with it, and we would just get a new one. But on this, we want to save it. We don't want that wire to unspool. So to do that, I'm just going to simply hold it here. I've got the MIG pliers, and all we're going to do, I'm actually just going to cut it on this backside because it's a little bit easier. So we're going to cut that there. And then typically on these things, you're going to have some little holes. There's a little hole here. The camera may not be picking that up. We're going to keep some tension on this thing. And then all we're going to do is just feed this through that little hole there. So if we want to, you know, change these things, if we're changing out wire, you can do stainless steel welding with this MIG stuff. So if you're like, hey, I'm done with this mild steel, I want to switch my setup for a stainless steel, I can do that. I can store this wire. I can pull these things off. You can do this. You can pull this whole spool off. I'm not going to because my mic is kind of in the way right now. And we really don't need to do that because we're just trying to unravel some of this stuff here. So those things, that little locking mechanism holds this thing, keeps this wheel from coming off of it. There's also a slight tilt to help with that as well. So now we've got our wire, it's not going to unspool. What we're going to do is we're basically going to get you guys back over to here. Okay, we're going to loosen this tension. All we're going to do is just flip that down. That's going to take all the tension off of this wire right here. And then we're going to go to our MIG gun. So I'm going to pull you guys back. Get back out here. And so the other thing that we're going to do is we're going to take our MIG gun. We're going to need our pliers as well for this. And to pull this wire out, you take your little nozzle off of this thing. We don't want that. We've got our contact tip that's right here. Get my camera into it. There we go. We've got our contact tip that's there. You can see a pretty good example of the ball that falls to the end. That's why we put these things every time. We're going to use our little MIG pliers. And we're going to grab them right there. We're going to loosen this contact tip. Now we're not going to go pull this tip off because of that little ball that's there, so we can just kind of cut that ball off. Once we loosen this contact tip up right here, we should be able to just slip that piece. These contact tips are sized for the wire that we have. So once we have that, we've got our little gun there, we've got the contact tip, we've got the nozzle off. All we're simply going to do with this thing is just pull this wire out. And you can notice I'm just pulling it out with my hand. This is all bad wire, so yeah, we're using a lot of this stuff, but this thing isn't going to weld right. You see, I've got a bundle of stuff here. Just going to toss that stuff. I don't need that at all. What we're going to do next, okay, after we get that, we've got our cable that's here. What we want to do with this gun is we want to make sure that we have a straight line up. Kind of over there. Maybe. There we go. You can see kind of our line here. We're not holding these things, right? We're basically getting them out. We want to stretch these things out as far as possible. Because that's going to make our lives a little bit easier as we're going through and doing this. I feel like we can get a better shot with the wire here. Yeah, it's hard to pick up. You can see kind of some discoloration right there. You see kind of some discoloration here. That's all just stuff, it's just rust that built up on this wire. And that's no good. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this wire. And we're just going to try to unravel this stuff. And we're going to probably take quite a bit of this stuff off. Simply just going to pull this thing. Just trying to get that top layer off. There's still a bunch of wire in here, but if I get that outer layer that's there, hopefully I get rid of that rust, and this thing will run smooth for us again. I'm just abandoning a bunch of this stuff, but we're going to save a lot. Normally, we don't have to do this. This thing was like running good at some spots, but on the bottom part is where it had like a lot of that rust kind of formed. That's where I was having a lot of my issues. Some of these wires that we have that got water on them, we're just going to throw them away because they're completely rusted over. And it's not even starting to get close here. There is still a ton of wire on them. So rather than throwing it away, still a lot. More than I thought. This MIG wire kind of looks like got a copper coating on it, and that's to help prevent rust from coming on, but it doesn't eliminate it completely. They have covers that you could put on these things. We kind of figured we were in the shop, we didn't have to worry about that. But yeah, no, we had a leak, so. Oh my gosh, there's so much wire. I'll show you guys this wire when I'm done.
And can you recycle that wire, or do you just throw it away?
I mean, theoretically it's steel, but it doesn't weigh that much, so there's almost no point to recycle this stuff. Oops. Fix my mic here, falling out. So yeah, we wouldn't recycle it. We're just gonna throw it away. We actually have a scrap bin, so I guess technically we do recycle it, and that's where I'll throw all this wire. There. If this whole bundle's bad, it's a lot easier just to switch this bundle out. Oh yeah. Yeah, we look a lot cleaner now. All right, so I'm not getting much of anything. I'm just gonna do a round, check around, yeah. Okay, so now that we've got this here, I'll give you guys a view of inside of this thing again here. Get my cable around here. So now that we've got this stuff here, we're going to take our MIG pliers and we're going to cut an end of this wire right here. So this wire, and again, you probably can't see it because it, camera's probably not going to pick it up, but it's a lot cleaner. It doesn't have that rust on there. And that was that little bit of rust really kind of provided a lot of issues welding. So to feed this stuff through, you want your wire to come down underneath. You want this to be as straight as a line as possible. Hit my mic here. I'm gonna try to get this up. Get it out of the way. Okay. So we don't hit it. I don't want to bend this wire at all. I want to make sure that we are, keeping this wire, as straight as possible. There. Good. And all I got to do is just feed my wire into that little hole that's right there. Our wire is going to feed through, and there is a liner that's on the inside. It might be kind of hard to see, but this little piece that's right there, it's a little wire coil, and that's the liner that runs inside of this gun, and that's what kind of guides this wire, keeps it from potentially getting bent on the inside, and allows it to go through. And we want to just make sure we feed it right on the inside of that liner. Once we have this, we can kind of just push this in a little bit. I didn't adjust with my tension at all. I didn't mess with it because it was good. I don't have any issues with it. So I'm just going to fold that down and pick that thing up and lock it in place. Now, because it's in between these two rollers, what I'm going to be able to do is I'm going to be able to turn this machine on, and I can hit my trigger, I can hit my jog function, and I can get my wire to basically feed through. And it's going to grab onto these things, and it's going to feed this through. On my gun, I want to make sure that I leave my contact tip out of there because I want to have a nice big open. I don't want this small, tiny orifice of this thing to go through. So I'm going to leave this thing open. I'm going to leave it exposed so that way that wire's going to be. We don't need to change the liner in these things, but if you would, you could pull this thing off, and that whole copper coil would essentially pull out this whole gun right here, and you can replace it. Sometimes they go bad over time when you use it, gets done on different things in there. You find out that the wire doesn't feed good. In this case, I can see if there's rust on there, so I'm assuming that that's probably the issue. I may find that this thing is still not feeding right. Maybe I need to change the liner. But for right now, we're going to pull some wire. We're going to do that and go from there. So we don't put the contact tips back in. We leave them out so that way these things are exposed. And we want as straight a line as possible with this gun. See that wire right there? Ooh, sorry, dropping you guys. Okay, you can see that we've got a pretty straight line where that gun comes. So we're gonna leave this thing. We got that thing in there. Hopefully you guys can see those rollers. We're gonna turn this thing on. This stuff's not gonna make contact with the table, so we're not worried about that. Causing an arc or anything like that. And then all I'm gonna do, let me come over here. You remember I got like my my jog and my purge right here. I'm just gonna hit this thing and you're gonna see this wire start to move through. Now, sometimes what you can do is kind of crank the speed up. I'm gonna mess with my mic right here. So I'm gonna make sure that I don't eat away at that. And you're just going to feed this thing through. As long as it's not creating like a rat's nest right here, sometimes this stuff will bundle up. If there's a blockage or if it's not feeding through, this thing will start to bundle up. So it's a good idea to kind of keep an eye on here. If this stuff is looking good and it's feeding through, you see your roll moving and it's not basically, you know, creating a little rat's nest of wire right there, then you're good to go. You could do this too by clicking the trigger. I'm going to try to move my mic over here. So you can do the same thing that I was doing on there. You can do the same thing with the gun, and you can click that trigger. So I'm going to step away because my mic is going to be a little bit quiet here, but I'll show you, move this to the gun. I'll show you that. Oh, do you see that wire? Kind of fed through. So now that we've got that wire, now that we have this wire fed through, we don't have to worry about keeping this thing in a nice straight line. Man, my mic is really messing up here. Okay, do this. There we go. So once we have that stuff there, we've got our wire fed through, we can take our contact tip, we can slip that over that wire. We can put this thing back in place. We can tighten that down. Use your MIG pliers and that little hole to kind of just snug these things. We don't need to get super tight. A little bit is fine. We can put this thing back on. We can twist it. If this is hot or if you can't get a good grip, the pliers also have the ability to kind of tighten right here. So we can do that. We can then click that to see how it works. We can clip our wire off. And now we've got our wire that's fed back through. Make sure you turn your wire speed down. If you turned it up, make sure you turn that wire speed down because it was up really fast. But it's a good way for us to kind of click through here and get through that stuff fast. So that is basically what we have. I'll show you guys real quick. See if I can not get you guys upside down here. You can see the bundle of wires that are on the ground right there that I now have to clean up. That's okay because it was all bad wire. But you can see we've still got quite a bit on this bundle here, and that stuff is a lot cleaner. It's nice and shiny. It's clean. That's what we wanted. So this thing, we should not have any issues. We shouldn't have any issues with this thing welding. So we're going to do a real quick test run of this stuff, as we're going to see. You'll notice I have long sleeves on. This is a nice shirt. I don't necessarily want to destroy this, but it's protecting me from the UV rays. And I'm just going to do a real quick weld test to see if this thing is working like I wanted it to. So, I'm going to cover my computer up so that I don't create a disaster with that, because that I am concerned with. And I don't have that little shield on there for you guys. We don't need that. We're just simply going to take this, make sure our gas is on. We'll purge this line of gas. I can hear it coming out, so we're good there. And just a quick test bead to make sure that this stuff works. Okay. All right. So that fed pretty nicely. I didn't have any issues with that. I'm going to clip that wire off. Really good. Remember to make sure you always clean these things out every once in a while, because I do get a bunch of burrs and stuff with that. My jacket's good. Any long sleeves will do. Sometimes students, they just wear like an old sweatshirt or something like that. And that stuff is perfectly fine to weld with. Just, you know, what's going to happen with it is it could put holes in your equipment. So that's the only reason why we kind of shy away from that stuff. Swap the pin over here. But that's how you change that stuff. You can see, you guys maybe a better view of this. It's hot. So hopefully I don't drop it on my computer and ruin that. Bring my mic down a little bit so that way you guys can kind of hear me a little bit better. Yeah. If you remember last week when we were trying to feed this stuff through, we were having a lot of issues with this. Maybe we'll do it like this. Maybe I'll show you guys with this camera right here. There you go. So you can kind of see that, you know, that's pretty decent weld, right? It's not too bad. It's got good width to it. I'm pretty sure we're getting the penetration. We were doing a spray arc on that because we were up at 24 volts and 400 on the wire speed. So it's a good hot weld. The biggest thing that I was looking for is not necessarily the weld quality. I was looking to see, was it sputtering? Was it sometimes, and if you remember last week, as I was welding, the wire would essentially stop feeding and the arc would kind of quit and it would kind of sputter a little bit. And we didn't get any of that. So that's a good sign that that wire is clean, that everything is feeding good. Our liner is probably good. We don't have an issue with maybe that having debris or a different material in there. So that's a good thing. I think we fixed this welder and it should work. And it didn't cost us anything but a couple minutes of our time. Doesn't take too long to refeed these things if you need to replace them. And very often we end up having to replace them. So yeah. Any questions, or what questions do you have, I should say? All right. If you guys don't have anything,